What is up? I'm Swift, and I'm here to talk to you, local Hack Day attendees, about how to be a badass hacker. So this is a talk that I've given at a couple of hackathons. The idea here is I'm going to tell you about some tips and tricks I picked up along the way that helped me level up as a developer, and I think can help you level up as a developer as well. So first things first, they call me Swift, not Ryan Gosling, despite the handsome resemblance. Yes, so I am the co-founder and CEO of Major League Hacking. A lot of you have probably seen me at hackathons before. My job is to go out and help make sure both hackathon organizers and hackers like yourselves are as successful as possible. It's kind of a dream job in a lot of ways. I get to work on things like local Hack Day and help make them a reality. So lots of love for hackers and hackathons, and I will tell you more about that momentarily. So pro tip number 1, go to hackathons. I think if you're at local Hack Day, you probably know why this is so important. But the truth is, hackathons and tech events are like a great way to help you, number 1, level up as a great developer, and number 2, meet a lot of really awesome people. So of course, I mentioned before, Major League Hacking. For those of you who might not know what Major League Hacking is, we run the world's official student hackathon league. So what that means is that every semester, we help support high-quality student hackathons literally all over the world. So when we started Major League Hacking, we launched with about 5 events back in the fall of 2013. And then the next semester, we grew from 5 events to 38 events and expanded to Canada. About 15,000 developers participated in Major League Hacking hackathons last spring. This fall, we expanded to the UK and Mexico both, which is awesome. And we had somewhere in the neighborhood of about 25,000 developers participate in all of the 60+ Major League Hacking hackathons that took place all over the world. So growing quite a bit. I mentioned this number already, the 15,000 students participated. This semester, this is the fall season, we had over 5,000 students participate during the first 4 weeks of hackathon season, which is great. There's always tons of hackathons to go to. Literally, you can go to the Major League Hacking website. We'll be launching the spring calendar next week, which is going to be packed with lots of awesome stuff this spring. We had over 60 events in the United States alone apply to be a part of the spring season. So lots of good hackathon love coming your way soon. But the question is, why do hackers go to hackathons? Now, I asked this question a long time ago on a survey. I think the information is kind of interesting. So the way I asked this was, what are your top 3 reasons for going to hackathons? And it was just a text box. It was very free form. Now, the answers I got looked something like this. About 81% of the people who answered this survey said that learning was among their top 3 reasons. About 71% said that networking was among their top 3 reasons. And about 44% said that building was among their top reasons for attending hackathons. So all those things, learning, networking, building, you'll notice that not a lot of them have to do with the competitive aspects, not a lot of them have to do with getting a job. Not a lot of it has to do with prizes or even swag, which is like, you'd think would fall on the top. Like swag, like these awesome hats, like why wouldn't you want to go to a hackathon? But the interesting thing is that, developers go to these things because they want to learn, because they want to meet other awesome developers just like themselves, because they want to get experience building things in the real world. That's the value of hackathons. And I think that the cool thing is that you get a lot of other people together who have that same mentality. I'll talk a little bit about the importance of that later on in this presentation, but those are the reasons that we're out here, and I think it's a good indicator of why this is such an important movement. Beyond hackathons, there's tons of other tech events too. Meetups, there's tons of them going on literally in every city in the world. You can find a meetup about anything. A couple of our speakers actually are meetup organizers themselves. So I know Kevin is the organizer of the NYC Android meetup. Myself and John organize the Developer Evangelist meetup in New York. There's tons of stuff going on. And that's not just, obviously a lot of those are in New York, but literally they take place anywhere. If you want to find an Android meetup and you're interested in Android, great. If you want to find an iOS meetup and you're interested in iOS, great. There's one everywhere. If there isn't one, you can always start one. A lot of interesting things happen to meetup. One of the stories I love to tell is about pure coincidence. So the New York Tech meetup is probably the largest meetup in the world. They do it once a month, and about 800 people get together in New York to talk about startups and startup culture. It's certainly more business focused than hacker focused, like building, but you do get some interesting tech there as well. So anyway, I'd spoken with the New York Tech Meetup a couple of times for different reasons. And I attended pretty regularly back in the day. And one of the times I was attending, I was kind of sitting in the front row, and the people who organized the meetup were in a panic because somebody who was supposed to be one of their 6 presenters hadn't showed up. So they looked at me, and they knew who I was because I'd been showing up and I'd demoed a couple of times. They said, "Hey, do you want to demo at the tech meetup?" And I thought about it, and I was like, "Sure, that sounds great." Wasn't prepared, hadn't planned on presenting anyway. All I did was like pull out an open source library that I'd been working on for a couple weeks, and I gave one of the best demos of my life on stage in front of like 800 people on a whim, just because I happened to be there in the right place and the right time. And a lot of meetups that I've been to are like that. They're just serendipity. It's you meet a random person who has some kind of connection or skill, or like ends up being a best friend. You can never really like count on it happening, but it happens often enough that it's like not worth ignoring. So lots of cool stuff happens at tech meetups, at hackathons, at in-person developer events. The conferences also probably deserve a shout out here. Local hack days, hackathons, anything where you can really go to find other developers, other hackers, other people who are interested in building, great things to do. Pro tip number 2, work on things you care about. So the first thing I look for when I'm interviewing people, and I've done this fair share of times, is I look for things like open source. Now, why do I look for open source? Well, and what do I mean by that at first, right? So like I look for things like, where do you contribute? So is it GitHub? Is it Stack Overflow? Is it Bitbucket? Now, most people think like open source is good because it demonstrates that people are good developers and you can go look at their code and like whatever. But the truth is, the reason that open source or like contribution in any way, shape, or form matters is because it demonstrates that you care about something. Back when I was in college at Rutgers, I didn't really have a GitHub, I didn't really have a Bitbucket, I didn't really contribute to open source that much, but I did spend a lot of time on Stack Overflow. I never put it on my resume, but honestly I should have now that I think back on it in retrospect. Because the truth is, like, it didn't matter that I didn't have open source. Like, having a GitHub link on my resume wouldn't have done anything for me, but showing that I was spending countless hours on Stack Overflow answering other people's questions would have done something for me. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to contribute to open source. There's a million ways you can give back. There's a million communities you can be a part of online. There's a million in-person communities you can be a part of. Demonstrate that you give back and like that you care, working on things outside of the normal school curriculum. Pro tip number 3, surround yourself with smart people. So this one, is imperative to success. It just makes a huge difference. One of the best places to do that is to find a local hacker community near you. I'm assuming that a lot of you at Local Hack Day are watching this, like, the local hacker community is right next to you. Look around the room. You can definitely find somebody there. And if you don't have a local hacker community, you aren't lucky to have that, start one. So back when I was at Rutgers, we didn't have a hacker community. We had a couple of people who might have been interested in hackathons. I didn't really know any of them for sure. And at some point, like, I remember traveling around to different hackathons with like random Rutgers students that I had met. And this one time in particular, I remember we had driven all the way from Rutgers to Boston, which was like a 5-hour drive for a hackathon. And it was like the worst hackathon of our life. Like, we hated everything that went down around it. It was poorly organized. It was just a complete train wreck. And we were driving home, and reflecting back on what had happened at the hackathon. And at some point or another, we came to the conclusion that it was ridiculous that we were paying out of pocket ourselves to go to hackathons when we were doing such a great thing for Rutgers and like building the brand of the community. So on the spot, in the back of some random hacker's minivan, we created this thing called the Rutgers Hackathon Club, which is now like a Facebook community of like 1,000 hackers. They have regular tech meetups, all kinds of awesome stuff going on at Rutgers. But all it took was just a couple of people who were interested in hackathons and wanted to get together and find a way to get more value out of it. So find the community at your school. If one doesn't exist, definitely start it. A lot of the most interesting things in life come from just randomly meeting people and like surrounding yourself with other smart people who can inspire you to work on things. So hacker community is a great place to find that. Pro tip number 4, read about tech every single day. Now, I've learned more random stuff that was useful on Hacker News and Reddit than I did in class or work combined, for sure. There's a ton of really interesting stuff that people write about on the internet every day. And specifically, there's so much information that you can take all of it and filter it down to just the things you care about, and it's still enough to consume on a daily basis that's interesting. And there's a lot of spam, right? So you need to like kind of learn to avoid that. I think that Hacker News in particular has gotten a lot worse in the past couple of years, and you need to really learn to look for things that have like buzzwords in them and basically bury them. And then also look for things that have like keywords that indicate they're actually relevant or interesting or technical in some way, and learn to read those. So some of my favorite tools for that, obviously, Medium's great. I mean, there's a huge section about hackathons and hackers, which I read all the time, and you know, it's fantastic. You can also read about individual technologies. There's a section on Medium where people who are Major League Hacking coaches write about their experiences building hacker communities. Like, there's all kinds of great stuff on there. Reddit, I mean, I just love to browse Reddit all the time. I think there's probably more spam on Reddit than there's on Hacker News sometimes, but if you can learn to get rid of that and stay out of the bad stuff, then you know, it's a great place. Twitter, I mean, that's one of my favorites. I probably don't tweet as much as I should, but I definitely consume a lot. There's a thing called Startup Digest, which I kind of still like, but I've liked less and less recently. They'll take like the top links for certain things, like they'll take the top Hacker News posts of the week and like send them to you in one digest email. You can also get Startup Digest about your like regional area. So there's like a New York City one where it's all posted about New York. VentureBeat, TechCrunch, it's all kind of the same stuff at some point, but definitely worth checking that stuff out too. So read every single day. There's lots of interesting information you can get from that. 5, now this one kills me, and I love when I give this talk in person and I get to do the question like, how many people in the audience have like a personal website? And you know, everybody in the audience more or less raises their hands. And then I say, okay, now keep your hands up if your website doesn't look like this, and it's got the giant coming soon logo in front. And of course, naturally, like 75% of the audience drops their hand down, because everybody has like a personal domain that's like a landing page for them, and they never put anything on it. And it drives me crazy, because you're like, man, you mean to tell me you're like a programmer and you can't take some HTML and CSS and throw it together for a personal website? So definitely, it's a great thing to look for when you're interviewing people. It's a great thing to proactively fix for yourself when you're going to go out and look for a job. Make a personal website. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. I mean, mine's just like a blog that I write on. I haven't written on it over a year, but like, it's got some stuff on it. The truth is, as long as you have something, it's more than most 99% of the population. So definitely, if you don't have a personal website, set one up, put something up on it, even if it's just like the links to your social accounts and a quick bio about you. That's more than a lot of people do. Pro tip number 6, write as often as you can manage. It's funny because I just admitted like a second ago that I haven't written on my personal blog in over a year. That doesn't mean I'm not writing every day or trying to, whether it be emails or like internal messages to people or like letters to friends and family. I try to like write a meaningful email to somebody once a week. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I don't believe in like taking the time to write a handwritten letter, but I could write a nice email thanking somebody for hard work or like whatever once a week, whether it be a colleague, a friend, one of my parents, my brother, whatever, right? So even if it's not like technical writing, some kind of writing is great. There's a ton of really great blogging platforms out there. There's Medium, WordPress, Jekyll, Ghost. I've used all of them. I personally use Jekyll these days still, but like I can see the argument for Medium. I can definitely see the argument for WordPress or Ghost too. But yeah, there's tons of stuff out there. The one thing I noticed that people say to me all the time though is like, hey, I would love to write more, but I don't even know where to start. I'm not a great writer, and I don't want to like embarrass myself by putting out a ton of like crap work initially. So it's really funny because I remember thinking the same thing when I was just getting started. I was at a conference talking to some guy who I later found out was Steve Klapnick, and I was talking to him about it, and he was like telling me he write every day, and I just couldn't wrap my head around like how he did it. And he said like the truth is, and at first nobody reads your blog, like they don't really care about what you have to say. And in the event that you actually end up being somebody and like it matters, you can really just go back and delete all the crap that's bad anyway. So what difference does it make? And I thought about it, and he's absolutely right. Even if you just write literally like a sentence or two about what you're thinking that day, you can always go back and delete it. I mean, sure, it'll be in like the Internet Archive somewhere maybe, or like, if somebody cares enough, maybe they'll like write it down. But the truth is like, unless you really blow up, nobody's gonna be looking for that stuff anyway. And if you really care about it, write under like an alias or a pseudonym or something. So there's definitely lots of venues to write without really even thinking about it. Number 7, learn to play the jobs game. Like this one's super critical. I didn't really get this until after I graduated, which is really interesting. But if you're still finding gigs at career fairs and on job boards, you're probably wasting your time, which is your most valuable resource. There's this thing my mom used to say to me when I was a kid that used to drive me literally off the wall bonkers. And I remember giving this talk one time, and my brother was in the room, and like I said this, and I could see the smile on his face too, because it drove him crazy too. She used to say, "It's not what you know, it's who you know." And the reason she was saying this to me is because when I was a kid, I used to have a bit of a smart aleck attitude for sure, where I would like try to get out of things by saying, proving that I knew more than the person that I was having a problem with. And she would always remind me that like, the truth is you can know everything in the world. You can be the smartest person out there, but sometimes it comes down to your relationships that make a difference. And like, honestly, most of my last few jobs I've gotten because of random people that I've known, not because I happen to be like qualified or technical. And in fact, I probably have never been qualified for a job I've ever had in my life, which is pretty crazy. But I could think back on my job at SendGrid as a developer evangelist was because I had a friend who introduced me to SendGrid. Go figure. Working on my last startup, Hacker League, like the reason I got into that was because I knew somebody who I happened to be friends with, right? The reason I'm working on Major League Hacking at all is because I happened to know a bunch of people who were hackathon organizers, right? Like it boils down to serendipity in a lot of ways, but it's, oftentimes it's who you know that matters. And along that same line, like your resume is a tool, and like you need to learn to use it. I don't know how many people in the audience have a resume that looks like this, but I see them all the time, and fundamentally that's just like blatantly wrong and probably one of the worst things you could possibly do. So like the truth is you want your resume to be something that causes somebody to ask you targeted questions, right? Like you should be able to look at a resume and know exactly what you want to be asked and have something to say about each of those things. So I'll walk you through a couple of my resumes from back from when I was a student to kind of show you what I'm thinking about and talking about. So I don't have my very first resume, but I do have the one that came right after that. So the first one was basically that Microsoft Word PDF. So this is the second one I came up with, and I wasn't getting any response on that Microsoft Word PDF, so I assumed that, hang on one second, guys. Are we good over there? No? Okay, so slight technical difficulties. Let me see what I can do to help. I know exactly what it is. Better? Yeah. Great, okay. So this is my first resume after that Microsoft Word template. Basically, like I wasn't getting any bites on the Word resume, so I decided that I needed to do something crazy. So I went for this, which was completely over the top. Don't ever do anything that looks anything like this whatsoever. Please, for the love of God, don't do it. The one thing I did get right is that doing something different does matter. I went a little overboard with color for sure. The things I did okay was I highlighted my work experience. Most of it's not relevant and most of it's pretty much bullshit. But I also had like this activities thing where I talked about some honors fraternity I was in, which has nothing to do with programming, of course. This entire giant L shape is all like school, like all school. And the skills, I listed every single technology I could think of under the sun. One of my experiences is MEETUP. Like that's a skill. And like SOAP and XML and like, oh my God, it's brutal. And I have like buzzwords like innovative, original, like it's pretty bad. So this was a train wreck. It's pretty bad. Don't do that. So later on I got second iteration. This was iteration number 2. This one was a lot better. So I still did the color thing. I definitely toned it down though. I didn't really understand visual hierarchies at this point in my life, but I got a couple of things right sort of by accident. So the first things first, like the employment stuff, much smaller, much more targeted. It's things that actually are relevant and matter. The next thing I did was talk about personal projects, which wasn't even on the other resume at all. This is great. It's stuff I'm doing outside of class. It demonstrates that I got things I care about. These are all projects I did. Most of these are projects I did at hackathons. They're bold and like draw your eye to them. So if somebody asks me about it, I can explain it, what it is and why it matters. Education is now condensed to like a little thing that like tells you like, yes, I have an education. Activities, notice that there's a ton of hackathons in here. That's great. If you're going to hackathons, put that on your resume. For the love of God, do it, please. Clubs, like yes, there's clubs on here. It's still the honor fraternity thing, but like, they're all targeted towards what I'm doing. Skills, I toned it down to things I actually knew, and software and frameworks, things I was actually using, which is great. And then I had this little quip at the end where I was talking about how much I love Node.js and why I thought it was the future. Literally everybody I sent this resume to would ask me about that. And it was fantastic because they'd say like, oh, well, why do you think Node.js is awesome? And now I'd have like something I could say to them that was meaningful and demonstrated that I actually had thought about it. And it was great because I could turn around and ask them the same question and say, what do you think? And now it's not an interview anymore, like a one-way street, it's a dialogue. That's a really powerful thing to have. So much better. I definitely, this was a big improvement from the other one. Like key takeaways are like highlight the things you do, work, outside of class experience, things that make you different, the things that you describe, keep them short and to the point. The question I always like to ask is, how would you explain this to your parents in one sentence or two? And so like, take whatever you do. So like Major League Hacking is a great example, right? All right, so say I wanted to put Major League Hacking in my resume. What I should put on there is how I would explain it in the 2 sentences. So Major League Hacking is a student hackathon league. We help bring the hacker ethos to every student on the planet, right? Like great 2 sentences, describes what it actually was, and then you can use another sentence to describe what you actually did. So like founded the company, helped grow a team, whatever, right? But like, so the point is that you have like these sentences that are very targeted towards one thing. So what is it? What did you do? So that's good stuff to have. And then iteration 3, this was the best one by far because it was designed for a specific job. This is actually the resume I used to get my job at SendGrid. Almost all of it is like actual experience. This whole thing is like things I was doing that were big and meaningful to me, like work that I was doing, my Hacker League, my last company. Education is like a pretty small thing on the side. The skills are all targeted towards the job I was getting. Notice there's a whole section about non-technical skills like public speaking, writing, blogging, social media, whatever, all things that were relevant to the evangelism job I was applying for. Experience, clubs that were actually relevant to like community, especially around programming, public speaking stuff, which you need as an evangelist, obviously. And then online presence finally showed up, which is fantastic. I was spending a lot of time on like GitHub and Stack Overflow and Twitter at this point in my life, and I wasn't telling anybody about it. I'm glad that it finally ended up on my resume. And then visual hierarchy, like the truth is no one's going to read the stuff in there. Like the places your eyes are drawn are the things that somebody's going to look at when they're skimming their resume, because they're going to have it in front of them when they have you on the phone doing a phone screen. And you want that to be like what they talk about. So if somebody's looking at this resume, they can say like, oh, what's CreditTap? What's Hacker League? And like suddenly now I have a million things I can talk about on those fronts. So a little bit of visual hierarchy, make the things you want somebody to ask you about big, and then everything else should just be filler, basically, that if somebody actually took the time to read, it would show that you're not an idiot. So lots of good stuff there. So those are all the pro tips that I set up for you guys. I mean, my closing note would be, if you're at Local Hack Day, you're probably taking a step in the right direction already. You're definitely like a light year ahead of where I was if you're a freshman or you're in high school or you're a middle schooler. There's a middle schooler who organized a Local Hack Day this week. Like, that's crazy. It drives me absolutely insane. I wish I was doing that when I was his age. But the truth is, like, find something you care about, whether it be hackathons or programming, or maybe it's art or theater or like reading or writing. It doesn't matter what it is, but find something you care about, spend time doing that, and then, show people that that's what you care about, demonstrate it, use it to help them make their lives better too. That's how you really level up as a person. And then if you take that whole ethos and you apply it to being a programmer, it's a great way to level up as a programmer as well. So hopefully that was informative and helpful to somebody out there. If you have any questions or like ever want me to look at your resume and give you feedback, happy to do it. I've done it for countless people. You can tweet at me or email me at swift@mlh.io. Happy to hear from you, and I hope you guys really enjoyed Local Hack Day and got something out of it to say. So thanks, guys.
We have a question that came in.
Yay, questions.
You claimed that 2 of the key things that you look for when you're evaluating candidates are open source contributions and their personal site.
Yep.
In absence of either of those, are either an instant vote to not hire, or are they just indicators in a certain direction?
So the question that came in was, I mentioned that I look for open source or personal website. If they're not present, is it an instant not hire, or is it just an indicator? I mean, so the point of those 2 things, again, is not like, are they there? Like the open source thing, I don't actually care if you contributed something on GitHub, right? Like if you look at 99% of your peers' GitHubs, most of it's going to be crap. It's going to be like forking an existing repo, or like their commits from a hackathon, it's hackathon code, like let's be honest. So like it's not about those particular things, it's about what they demonstrate, right? Like open source demonstrates that you care about something, that you'd spend the time on your weekend, at your night, the time you're supposed to be working or in class to like contribute to open source. If you're not contributing to open source, like, and it's not on your resume, fine, but like make sure something's on there that demonstrates like that you are at least passionate and care about something. I remember talking to a guy who was like, he was passionate about triathlons, which is great, and like he had it all over his resume, and like, yeah, it had nothing to do with programming, but like he spent his night and day working on a triathlon club that he was working on. Like, great, I'm super into that. It would be better if it was programming for some jobs for sure, but for most other jobs it doesn't matter. And then like the personal website is basically a test on whether or not you can like follow through on a basic project for yourself. If you don't have a personal website, but you have like a ton of other things that you're building for yourself, great. I don't need a personal website. I've got lots of things I can see about you. But like the inability to have a personal website and the inability to like have any personal projects for yourself is like a negative signal, right? So it's not necessarily those things, it's what they represent that matters. Cool. All right, guys. Well, hopefully you got something out of it. Have a great night and happy hacking, everybody. We'll see you shortly for the sign off.